Welcome to season 11 of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. This is where we chat with experts in the field, patients who use these devices, physical therapists, and the vendors who make it all happen. Our goal is to share stories, tips, and insights that ultimately help our patients get the best possible outcomes. Tune in and join the conversation. We are thrilled you are here and hope it is the highlight of your day. Hello, everyone. This is Brent and Joris with the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. But as you can probably hear, Joris isn't doing the introduction here. So he is actually at a trade show. So you only get me today, but that's okay because we're going to have a good time. We have Matt Doering from Cypress Adaptive and here with us. And, one really neat thing that I know about Cypress is they want to come alongside of you and help you create a prosthesis that's the right thing for your patients. The things that they're known for are their valves and other components that go along with it, but they're also known for sockets. And so a lot of people haven't heard of the Symphony Aqua system, which we'll probably get into a little bit, but it's using water pressure to create transtibial and transfemoral sockets, and with amazing success. And so the neat thing about that, and as you know, I love recipes to get patients great outcomes. So we'll also hop into that as well. So Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brent. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Well, our first question to you is always, how did you get involved in the prosthetic and orthotic field?
I think I've ever told you this story. It's I don't know. It's a little bit interesting to me. It's not your traditional way, and you'll understand what I mean in a few seconds. But so I was in the Coast Guard when I was a younger man. It's funny how in this industry, it doesn't take long to look back like, wow, I'm like one of the older guys in the industry. Like quickly, I've been in this field 26 plus years now. So anyway, I got out of the Coast Guard. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My wife had got accepted into veterinary school. She's a veterinarian. And so I moved back across the country. She was already in school. She graduated. I graduated. I didn't know what I wanted to do. We moved down to Tampa, and I got a job building boathouses in the middle of summer in Tampa, moving from a northern climate. And just to fill time and figure out what I wanted to do, well, I blacked out on a roof of a boathouse within the first couple months. I'm like, okay, I'm not doing physical labor in the summer down in this environment. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got a job at a Ford dealership. It was like a big marquee Ford dealership thing, just till I kind of got my feet settled and figured out what direction I wanted to go. Well, I went through a training program at the Ford dealership, and then we had like one of those off-site sales, like Sunday, come here, buy your car, all that. So I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I want to understand it. I want to get good at it. That's how you're going to make money. So it's funny, people in my little class, my education class for the dealership, they were judging cars as they pulled into the tent sale. Like, oh, I'm not going to help them. I was like, I'm going to help everybody, because the only way I'm going to learn is just to help everybody make my mistakes, look like an idiot, all that fun stuff. And this green Nissan I remember this so vividly. This green Nissan Pathfinder pulls into this offsite sale with Tasmanian devils painted all over it. And they're like, oh, I'm not taking them. I'm like, I'll take them. Well, fast forward, that was the owner of Euro International. It was a pretty well established company at the time. We're just kind of starting. They were starting to get a name. They used to be a subsidiary of Autobot. That's literally how I learned that our industry even existed. I sold them a brand new car. He happened to live near me, and they messed up his paperwork. So I brought him his paperwork. I was at his house, and I flat out asked him, I said, hey, I see you import, export. I'm like, do you have any opportunities in your company? He thought about it. And after a couple of weeks, he called me and said, why don't you come in? And I started working there part-time at Euro International and working the Ford dealership. And I ended up traveling all over the world with this guy and learned this industry and never really looked back. So,
wow, that is an amazing story. And I think it goes to show, though, I love the kind of the attitude or wherewithal, like, hey, we're going to help everyone. And I think that kind of attitude can take you a long way, especially
Absolutely.
with, in the prosthetic and orthotic field. Not only are we a niche industry, but we also serve a niche subset of patients and doctors, and word gets around quickly if you're not doing the right thing or helping the right thing or what have you. So that's pretty cool.
So yeah, it was a neat experience to just looking back and reflecting on that to now. So it's,
Yeah.
quite a journey. So
Well, let's talk about now. Where are you at now? Tell us a little bit about your company, and then we'll kind of dive in from there.
yeah, and I'm not knocking anyone that has done it, but we all know, if you've been in the industry a while, people. I always lovingly and jokingly refer to our industry as Hotel California, because you could check out anytime you like, but you can never really leave, especially once you get a certain level of experience and knowledge, because it's such a nuanced industry. We've all seen it. People that have come in from pharmaceutical companies or venture capital companies tend to fail a lot trying to buy patient care, or they did early on. It's changed a little bit, but um, it takes time to learn. And once you learn, you have a very valuable skill set. Even on my side, the manufacturing, supply, sales side of things, you really have to understand a lot about it. And it's great. I love it. It's a very, very rewarding field. But some people in our industry have jumped from job, company to company to company to company. I've been fortunate where I have not. I started at Euro International. Then I went out on my own as an independent rep type person, and I represented Endolite. I was literally the first independent sales rep at Endolite before they didn't even have sales reps. And that's before Blatchford even existed. So I repped Endolite. Who else did I rep? ESP. I repped ESP. So, and then I repped a brace company called Hope Orthopedic. And then I eventually bought my own foot orthotic lab I was partners with. We used to make all Dr. Comfort's custom orthotics before they made their own. So, I kind of just started really diving in. So my track record after Endolite, I became a full-time salesperson at Endolite and dropped the ESP lines, Hope lines. I sold my interest in the foot orthotic company, and I just focused on Endolite. I really liked the prosthetic side of our industry. So I really focused on that. So I was there 12 years, and then I transitioned from there to ESP. I was at ESP for 2 years. And then it wasn't necessarily the direction I wanted to go, after kind of being there, and I was reevaluating. So I wanted to start my own company. So in 2016, I started Cypress Adaptive, and once again, never kind of looked back. Just shortly after I started Cypress Adaptive, I met Andreas, who you've met. Andreas Radspieler is the founder and developer of the Symphony Aqua system. I met him at the Boston show, AOPA Boston show, right shortly after I started Cypress Adaptive. They were at the Medi booth, and Medi was showing the system, and Andreas and his other partner was there demonstrating the system. Well, that was the show that Oser bought Medi, and that they did a great job, because our industry, word travels real fast, and they did a great job at. No one knew anything about that. That was one of the best acquisitions that was kept quiet, because it was a shock to everybody when that happened. Long story short, that system, I got introduced to Andreas after word got out that they were bought by Oser. And Andreas was also kind of introduced to myself and my partner, Lynn. And people know the name Lynn. Lynn's been around the industry a long time. She is my business partner. I'm always reluctant on how I say this, Brent, but the reason I do, I like making the correlation with her name, just to validate that we know what we're doing when it comes to manufacturing valves. We have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge in how to manufacture valves the right way. My partner Lynn is Lynn Valve. That Lynn Valve was named after Lynn. She helped really brand that and get that to what it is today. So So that's the only reason I like making that correlation, just to validate, we're not just trying to throw a valve out in the industry. We designed our valves a very specific reason for a very specific, because we know functionally that spring and diaphragm concept is far superior than anything else that exists. And what I mean by that specifically is you can get a fair amount of debris in that spring and diaphragm setup, and that valve will still function totally fine. Whereas if you have a duckbill valve or an umbrella valve or something like that, you get a little piece of lint in there and it's going to leak. Ours don't. Plus, you can replace parts in our valves. Like you could buy a new diaphragm for like $8 and keep that valve functioning even longer. We would like you to buy a new valve, but this ultimately helps the patient and the practitioner. So our philosophy from early stage going into it was, if we can make these parts replaceable for low cost to keep the functionality going and not inconvenience patients, because they can quickly get it swapped out, not be an inconvenience in time and money and everything else, then in the long run, we felt like we were going to get a good portion of that business in time, and the volume would be high enough where it would sustain ourselves by not selling a new valve every time. Because our whole world is planned obsolescence. Your washing machines last 5 years and they break and they want you to buy a new one. That's a horrible model. And we didn't want to do that. So that might have been a little long-winded as to explain that, but
No. Well, I think that's interesting. So you really have a couple um, diversified products. You've got the valve lineup and some of the accessory side of things, and then you have the Symphony Aqua stuff. What would you say is your philosophy around valves? Like what makes a good valve? You mentioned a couple of different things, the spring and diaphragm, duckbills. Can you take us into the weeds a little bit and then kind of why you landed on where you're at? And then also from the patient side, I'm sure Lynn, you know exactly how she feels about valves as well. What from the patient side, what is important?
yeah. So both, it goes hand in hand for both practitioner and patient. The reason we approached, we kudos to ESP, and we know how the sausage is made, and we know where it truly came from, where the designs and the concept truly came from. It isn't it isn't 100% proprietary, but we felt strongly, like I said, because it's a superior methodology. But the key on a good valve is just you have great airflow, automatic airflow expulsion. So at as little as a half PSI, no matter what, you get a little leak in your sleeve or something, that air is being pushed out with minimal effort all the time. So it's always working. It's kind of quietly working in the background. But if you have a leak, it can't fully keep up with it. You're always going to, but it's always pushing air out. You need very smooth airflow and functionality. Operation has to be smooth, very little effort. And there's a lot of dexterity issues with people with multiple limb loss, digit loss, and everything else. So you also have to take into consideration that for design. If it's a valve that has to be unscrewed from the socket or a button push, well, some people don't have that ability, especially upper extremity or multiple extremity loss. If they only have one arm and they're trying to doff their prosthesis and they have to push a button like that, that's very, very challenging. So a good valve will be thinking of these different things. And that's why our valve line is kind of expanded as well, because there is no black and white in prosthetics. It's always gray. It's always nuanced. There's always going to be someone that has a situation that's slightly different than the norm. And so you have to be able to accommodate these patients. They have to be able to function and live their life. So you always are trying to approach it from a patient perspective. Like, how can we make this easier? And in the early stages, like anything, you have your trials and tribulations. Like, all right, we need to improve that. But a good company and a good product will evolve and just drive more and more efficiency and smoothness into it until the point, where it's like, all right, this is pretty dialed in. And we've gone through those iterations of our valves, and we're very confident where we're at now. We're coming up to what? I started January 2016. So we're in essence in our 10th year, or going to be starting our 10th year, how that works. But
Yeah.
So we've been around enough and we've evolved it. I would put our valves against anyone for sure. So
So, let's take a look, like 2016 to now. I mean, you've done some evolving, not only as a company, but in some of the manufacturing and that sort of thing. And so, from what you've explained to me before, there's like, to prevent leaks, air is very sneaky, right? It can get in pretty much anywhere, and somehow you have to seal that off. Can you take? I mean, you don't have to share like how it's done, but like
that's right.
uh, what is important when it comes to manufacturing and things that some of our listeners may not even think about when it comes to manufacturing these very precise bodies, essentially, to make sure that you don't have the leaks.
Well, so manufacturing from the prosthetist side, manufacturing in fabricating into a prosthesis, or manufacturing from our side from design and
Well, I guess I didn't think about it from the prosthetic side. I'm guessing that's probably the weakest link is our manufacturing
those are your
for
words, man. Those
the
are those.
making. Hey, I'll poke at us all the time, But so let's talk about making sure that your product's good, right? That side of things, but then we can talk about the challenges of like the customer service side of troubleshooting this. So I think that would be a good segue.
Well, from the manufacturing side, to make it function properly, you're working with very small tolerances, like a sheet of a piece of paper, sometimes less, sometimes two sheets of paper, and a slight difference in those tolerances can decrease the functionality of it. And so that's very challenging, especially because we started with machining all our valves, and we still machine a fair amount, but because of our volumes hit a point where it made sense. Molds are, as you probably are aware of, molds can be very, very expensive. So, but we started, smartly investing in some molding, especially for a lot of our valves that have similar parts across, because it's a smarter way to do it. But like, you don't even have to know what it is exactly, but a vent spool, right? The vent spool is a very important small piece in all of our valves. We have three different types of vent spools. Between the three types, they're pretty much across the board in a series of different valves. Well, that gets tricky. Like I said, those tolerances, if they're off a little bit, that can really make something not work or be problematic. And to the practitioner side, you don't hear about if people are having issues with our valve. They don't necessarily are going to call us like, hey, I tried this valve and this didn't work. It's a commodity product. They're just going to move on and say, I tried it, and they're going to go right back to what they were using before. That's very difficult from a manufacturing side because you work really hard to build some confidence for someone to try you. And then if they try and you have an issue, that's very, very hard to get them to come back and be willing to give it another try, especially if you have a problem. So whereas a knee or something else, a more higher end product, if something doesn't function properly, you are absolutely going to call the manufacturer and say, hey, I don't know what's going on with this, but software's glitching, or this is functionally, this mechanically, this isn't working. And we don't hear that as much. We do occasionally still, but you don't hear that as much, like I said, Brent, because they're just going to go back to what they were doing before. So that's one of the challenges from the manufacturing side. That's why it's so important to both think about it from the patient side and what they have to deal with, but also the practitioner side and their manufacturing process. And this is where the chuckle comes in a little bit. And even when my 12 years at Endolite, you really have to, that's not the right word. You have to word things in a way and make things easy for people to digest. And the reason being, it isn't picking on practitioners. Practitioners are burdened with a lot of stuff. As you know, they have many, many hats they have to wear and very little time. And so to be able to shift gears when you're trying to be productive, now I got to troubleshoot this. I have to learn how to do this. I have to learn how to do that. Our industry, the practitioners are creatures of habit. It just is. So it's hard to convince them like, this is slightly different than what you've been doing, but there's an upside to it. That's very hard. So it isn't because they don't pay attention or they don't care. They do, but they're limited in time. So you have to try to make things as easy as humanly possible to make those types of transitions to new products. So I don't know if that kind of answered the question a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, no, I think that's important. I think you touch on even talking about how you got involved with your first position and then moving on. I mean, and then you talked about the VCs, sometimes coming in with some, a lot of money, and they thinking that they can take over this industry with a lot of money. Um, but what you're explaining is, you know, yes, you've been around for a long time, but this industry, and this, we have a lot of other vendors and people listen to the podcast to find out how to better, serve our industry. But I think the key to this is relationships, relationships, relationships. So, and picking
Absolutely.
up the phone. And so I'd love for you to just dig in a little bit on your philosophy at Cypress about that, because it is so important, because we see people come and go very quickly. Money comes in real quick and gets burned up pretty much, and then they move on. And there's not a big appetite for that in our field either. So people, yes, they're creatures of habit, but they're also creatures of those that will stay and reinvest their um, money.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point. And that's one of the things I'm proud of as well. I referenced 26 plus years and I started at 98. My partner, Lynn, has been in the field, I actually maybe a year longer than me, 26, 27 years. We have another partner who uh, does a lot of our design work and our technical and troubleshooting aspects of our product line, not just the valves. He's been in the field 20 plus years. He has geez, between his time in prosthetics and before prosthetics, he's got 30 plus years working with silicone. Like he used to be, do a lot of the silicone design and manufacturing for ESP back in the, so he's a great asset to have. And so we've all been in this a long time and we feel very fortunate. Yeah, there's frustrations in our industry. There's challenges. There's a lot of dynamic shifts going on, with the onset of manufacturers getting in more and more into patient care, some of the regulation issues. There's a number of things going on. But at the end of the day, it's a very rewarding field to be a part of where you can truly help individual people and get them functioning and very much participating in society. I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, but one of the most rewarding things that I've been a part of that I love about this industry is seeing, and it doesn't happen with everyone. And you're going to realize where I'm going with this in a second, but when you have a patient that they just lost their limb for whatever, vascular reasons, trauma, who knows? There's a whole psychological roller coaster that they're going to go on as well to my life is over. But when you get them surrounded with good peer support of people that have gone through the process, I love, love, love seeing someone that feels like their life is over to now tell me I can't go ride that bike 200 miles. Tell me I can't go hike that mountain. And they do more without their limbs than they did when they had all their limbs. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's what I love that aspect about the field that we're in, being able to help people. It's not a lot of people get that opportunity. Yeah, doctors and all this stuff. There are other things, but man, just the uniqueness of our industry. It's been the best thing in my life for sure, being a part of it, no doubt about it. And like I said, that comes with its fair share of frustrations as well. But at the end of the day, that'll pass. Those frustrations are fleeting; they come and go. So
Yeah. Well, I know we've talked before, and I'd love for you just to share a little bit about it. I mean, the reality is you could sell into any industry. Like you personally, you've been in a lot of things, and you've chosen this because you've seen the life change of the things that you can do. I think that's the interesting thing that I see. This is maybe we can touch on this a little bit. Uh, is with the education changing to a master's level program, and who knows where it's going to go from there. The you have a large population of people coming in for that feeling, right? The feeling of, hey, I'm making a difference in a patient's life. But a lot of times, obviously, feelings don't pay the bills either. But there's a lot of engineers that come into our field,
Oh yeah.
and they want to make a difference in people's lives, and they're doing it, and then but they're seeing their friends that are engineers make way more money,
Right.
and with that master's degree, you can, just because you, by nature of, you have an extra piece of paper, it doesn't matter that it's in prosthetics orthotics, you have the ability to um, bail on the industry essentially, and go make more money. And so I think it's interesting for those that are those that are looking. Can money be made in O&P? Yes, sure. Can
Yep.
more money be made outside of O&P, selling into the automotive space, DoD, that sort of thing? Yes, very much so, from a engineering, or even a clinical standpoint. But there is something special about our field, and what we're able to, obviously, along with the patients, empower people to do and make a difference. I'd love for you just to share, like, some of your insights on that aspect. I've been in the field. Actually, we probably started about the same time, Matt. I was like 1996. It was actually when I first got
Wow.
into the field.
Damn, Brett, you're way older than I thought.
But what's interesting is, now that I'm on this side and I've been through, some different jobs, I probably hopped when I wasn't supposed to hop, to another job.
Right.
And I look back on my career, and I just tell people, don't chase the money. Your freedom, and also chase, a, a group of leaders, a business, or start your own place, but don't chase the money, chase the freedom. So I'm just kind of curious on your input from what
I
you
love
see.
that you said it that way. 100%. I've had very similar conversations over the years to younger people, older people, when we're just kind of spitballing about getting nostalgic and stuff. If you do the right thing by the patient and you are consistent with that over time, just like any investing, you're investing in yourself, the money will come. Like you said, even if the engineers that come in, and then if they went into automotive, and that's a great example, yeah, they could most likely make more money, but then it's the quality of life issue and fulfillment issue as well. That, yeah, the money might seem great initially, but then eventually, well, what am I doing? What? Why am I doing this? But even to digress further, this is a new phenomenon within our industry. Once you know the education side of things started getting on par with what it should be, and I fully believe, I truly believe, like, I think a master's degree is the right level. Yes, you can expand on that. Some people are just made for academia, and they will always stay in that track, which is fine. We need that. Um, but we have such an influx of younger people coming in because historically, this, like, the way people came into our industry is they knew someone, their neighbor or uncle, relative, whatever, was an amputee. They met this place and they started working in the back. They started sweeping the floors in the back, right? Then they liked it. It's kind of neat. It's very artsy, hand crafts. Um, then they start standing on some foot orthotics, right? Then they start to get to observe and work on some BKs. And then most of the time at that stage, they either go become a tech or they eventually go to school and become a practitioner. Well, that's still exists, but that's not the predominant way people are coming into this field. They're learning of this orthotics and prosthetics, like, you can get a master's degree in this. I can work with patients. I can, so you have so many people that are coming into the field with no real hand skills, no real experience. They're gaining that, but they don't have that, and how historically our system was working. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. That's just a reality. That's where we're at now. That's where our industry is. And this is why the 3D printing side of things, like, you've been on the forefront of, a pioneer of, and there's several guys, that I follow. I'm not well versed in the 3D printing space, other than what I've kind of learned from you and some of the other people, just from observation or conversations that you and I have had, I'm a fan. I'm not anti 3D printing. You and I talked, and I don't know if I should talk about this, but as I told you, Cypress Adaptive wants to work with your community. And I'm saying your community, but you are a figurehead in the 3D printing space. So specific in our industry. We want to work with you. You and I already talked about some cool ideas and concepts that we could share, and try to make something very unique for that. It's not going away. It's very much a part of our industry. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to find its place. We want to help foster that. We want to be a part of that, as much as possible. So how do we blend our technology, in our valves and what we do into what you do? And we have some more specific details, but I'm excited at that prospect. It might not go anywhere, but I think it can. I think we've talked about some pretty cool things that we might be able to do, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and I think and before we get into the Symphony Aqua, this idea of the recipe for manufacturing, how cool would it be that you knew that your valves were going in something the way that you specified them to go every single time? For the manufacturing side, I mean, it would be a win-win-win,
win-win-win
for everybody. And so I think that's the neat thing, that is really at stake here is, with 3D printing, the vendors, manufacturers get to specify exactly the way they want, how their valve or whatever component they want is to be used. And, that is via files, that's via instruction. But the reality is, right now, for those that are doing traditional fab, is almost every application of the device is an off-label application, right? It's like everything is unique. Well, I just was going to move it this way, So, and I'm saying that to poke fun at our industry, but that's really the way it is. And so you can say till you're blue in the face, like, hey, that's probably not the best idea to do it like that, and here's why, and this is the 26 years of experience that we have, and people are going to do it anyway, and then it's not going to work, and they're going to call you up and say, hey, it didn't work, your valve's no good, or your component's no good, and it's like, well,
we'll get the blame long before someone will take the blame on themselves. That every not just Cypress, but every manufacturer, absolutely,
yeah. Well, and I always have this. So I was a technician before I became a clinician, and so if anything went wrong, it was the technician's fault. If everything went right, it's the clinician is the most amazing person ever. So, but anyway, that's just
the clinical side shit rolls downhill, and the manufacturing side shit rolls uphill. So,
yeah. Well, I'd love to hop in the idea of what you have going with the Symphony Aqua system. Some of our listeners may have heard of it, some of them have not, but I'd love for you to just dive in on the why, and then just talk about how it works, and even if you can share some stories about successes, even from shows or even from patient things, because you have a lot of those as well.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Brent. And that's. So in my tenure in the industry, the Symphony Aqua system by far is the coolest thing I've ever been a part of. And that's simply, and I'm saying that simply from the reaction from the patients after being fit with the Symphony Aqua, the shape capture that the Symphony Aqua provides. And that's all it is. It's the shape capture that it provides. It's just another tool, and I tell people this often, it's just another tool in your arsenal, but that doesn't limit your method of suspension, the type of liner you use. It's just ensuring the most intimate shape capture out of any system that has ever existed in our industry to date. Now, that could change in time, it might, but it's been incredible. When we first started going 2016, 2017, when we first started going around the country and demoing this technology, what we would typically do is like, we'd go to a facility, right? And we would say, they would typically have a patient lined up. We already kind of prearranged, like, give us a patient. We don't dictate anything, just bring us a patient. Unfortunately for us, most people love throwing their very most challenging, hardest patients in the world at us because they've tried everything and they're desperate to try to accommodate this patient. Everyone has patients like that. So here we are, don't know any history of the patient, and we're casting this patient and expecting to produce miracles. Well, what started convincing me is we were actually starting to really produce these miracles a lot of times. And I'm like, and not every time. We don't claim it's the answer for everything. That will never exist in our industry, period. But what we would do is we would take the most senior prosthetist and then the most junior prosthetist or resident. All right, senior prosthetist, cast this patient either by hand, scan, whatever you typically do in your day. And then we take the junior prosthetist, same patient, use what we just taught you on the system. Both of you go make a check socket and we do a blind fitting. It becomes very, very humbling for the golden hands guys and girls. There's a lot of them out there. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. You need to have confidence and competency in what you're doing, but you also need to have an open mind. And that's what gets short-stepped a lot, is keeping that open mind. So we've started winning those battles all of the time. I'm saying like to a 95% success rate, maybe higher. I'm being generous. That was a very strong indication. Like there is something very, very real and tangible with this technology. And to the point, I remember one of the first demos. After a while, we had started getting some systems rolling out there, and there was a gentleman. He had 3 patients. The first 2 were kind of quote unquote home runs, very great fittings. The wow factor from the like, wow, like this is incredible. And then the third patient, not so much. And I was feeling a little bit dejected. I was like, oh man. So this particular practitioner, his name is Doug. He's like, Matt, this is not a loss. He's like, you don't know any history of her. You don't know that it's taken me 9 months to get this particular patient where she is now. And on your first attempt, you're as good or better in one try than it took me 9 months to get her. This is a win. And from that point forward, my mentality on the system dramatically changed. I'm like, I'm looking at this completely wrong. And to go back to the students coming in general, whether you have experience around prosthetics or you're new to it, that's a pretty decent learning curve to get to a high enough competency level where you can consistently start putting out some pretty good quality fitting sockets. There's no easy way to take what your knowledge is, Brent, and plug it into me. It takes time. Well, the Symphony bridges that gap a lot. You still have to be a prosthetist. You still have to understand anatomy, nomenclature, alignment, product selection. All of that stuff is still very much applicable. But as a business owner, if I have a lot of younger people in my practice and I'm looking for an exit strategy, or I want to make sure that if I'm gone, I know that the level of output that we're putting out across every practitioner is going to be much higher. That's what the Symphony Aqua system does. It gets your starting point at a much higher level. Less remakes, satisfaction of patients, less time for patients to have to reschedule, come back, reschedule. That's a massive burden on a lot of people that are, working. And most people I know some very wealthy people, but the vast, vast majority of people I know are just regular working people like myself, just trying to do what you have to do. So as a patient to have to, and you get your hopes up, right? Like, oh, I just got fit with hopefully I get my leg, next week or in a couple of weeks, and they're waiting patiently. They want to get their leg. They want to start living their life. Well, this also shortens that cycle of being able to deliver a very high quality, very intimate fitting socket. And we talked about that as far as we have enough systems out now. I think we're in the US, we're probably between 170 and 190 systems that exist in the US, and not all of them are being utilized to the level that some are. We have some outfits that if I threw out names, you would know them. Most people would know them. They run systems every single day. Every office has them. They run their whole operation based off the Symphony Aqua system, and not exclusively, but the vast majority. Like it is a high percentage of what they do. We had a scenario last year. Time goes by so fast. Within the last couple of years, I'm trying to think how to politically correctly articulate this, but we were told that we don't want a demo because something happened that was out of our control. It was from a different company. And we kind of pleaded, like, Andreas was 10,000 miles traveled from Germany. I had other people that were there. So we begged and pleaded, and they kind of like, fine, you can use our room. And I was like, all right, let us just train ourselves. If you want to be a part of it, you're more than welcome. Like, thank you so much. Well, now they mandate it. They own 6 systems, and they encourage all their practitioners to, like, unless the patient's a transfer patient and doesn't need that level of intimacy, everyone goes through the system. And that's very rewarding when we run into those scenarios. And it just proves the validity and the efficiency that these systems can drive into an organization. You're muted, I think, or I lost sound.
Got it. Yes. I was on my mute button. So I think the idea of the recipe is very interesting. And now that I'm a part of I would say a larger company, especially on the transtibial side of things, like the last thing you want to do is come in on somebody's prosthesis that you don't know what happened as far as in the recipe goes, right? So I think that's an interesting point. I think it's also an interesting point looking at the future when you're talking about additive manufacturing and the how that correlates to the recipe of getting the shape. So, there's a myriad of ways to capture the inside shape of the cast. But I mean, with what you have going, you can probably use some of the, single thickness sock type things or what have you. I mean, you may not suggest that, but anyway, all I'm saying is that you can scan the outside and probably still get very close to the shape, and then let automation go from there, whether you go 3D printing or carving or whatever. But a lot of times you would never have to touch plaster. And so I think that is also very neat, because where people struggle is this idea of scanning. So you scan somebody that doesn't have any compression on, and then you're saying, okay, I need to reduce a certain amount of ply to get the tightness, but then you end up too short or whatever. And so this is, I think, where the Symphony Aqua system or something that is similar is really great, because you're actually getting the anatomy under pressure, under load, the way that it's supposed to be, and you're not guessing anymore. And so I think that's what I love about this idea of recipe, and having a recipe, especially when you have good patient outcomes, is not a negative thing, and it's not something to be ashamed of. It's like, that's not a crutch. It's and so what I love is you guys did a pretty neat VA study, right? It was a VA study that had practitioners over the whole spectrum, and most patients preferred the Symphony Aqua capture method. And I think that just says a lot about being consistent every single time, taking some of the human factor of, is my Sureform sharp? Did I use the new sheet of sand screen or the older sheet of sand screen? And you just don't know what was done.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important.
Well, yeah, I mean, 100% important. We learned some things early on as well, because, and to what you said, when you're scanning, right? What are you scanning? you're scanning a liner, a cylindrical liner that's compressing the skin a little bit. You don't have no idea what's under the surface. The Symphony Aqua system, that membrane will dive in as far as it can, where it can. Those transitions between muscle belly, soft tissue, bony anatomy, as a practitioner, if I cast a patient 10 times, I'll be pretty close. But they're not going to be exact. They might be, who knows? Maybe I didn't get any sleep the night before. I was in an argument with my kid or whatever. I'm just mentally, that can dictate as well. And when, for you when you're scanning, all you did is trade a physical rasp for a digital rasp for your mouse. You still have to understand what you're taking off, what you're putting on, and where you're doing it. It's still very subjective. And to your point, whereas the Symphony, if you try to get fancy, you're going to mess it up. Let the system dictate what it wants, where it wants, and how much it wants for that each individual patient. And it's going to be different. Another very cool thing that we see often as the example on the Symphony Aqua system is it builds your accommodations, your modifications in while you're casting them, right? And so everyone has a patient with a neuroma or a fib head issue, right? So if I have a known patient that has a neuroma issue, I will do a trial run with the system. I'll pressurize it to what my app tells me how much pressure that particular patient needs without putting any plaster or any wrap on them, so they can stand in the system. If I pressurize it to what the app says and they don't feel that neuroma, then I'm not touching anything. Now, if I do that exercise and they're feeling that neuroma, then that just tells me, okay, fine. Then I'll take the pressure off. I'll reflect the liner down. I'll pad that spot. I'll pull the liner back up, and then I'll cast them. And that's it. I'm not doing anything on the back except smoothing it up. If I want to put a posterior shelf on, I can if I want to. I personally think that's a better method, but whatever. Or I'll just heat it up and flare it out after the fact. Either way, it doesn't really matter. So, and like you said earlier, you're capturing how many amputees that are complaining about their socket fit when they're sitting in a chair. Not many. It happens if they're sitting in a weird spot, but most of the time it's when they're standing, they're ambulating, they're doing some type of physical activity. Well, that's why it's so important to capture the shape under a full weight bearing, condition, because that's reflecting of what your limb is trying to do when you're doing physical activities. It makes all the sense in the world. And when you see it, when you're around it and you actually see the real-time feedback, like I said from early on, like that's like, all right, there is absolute truth and validity to this. Now that there's so many systems out there, I used to have a better idea of what people were doing on a day-to-day basis, but I can't keep up with everyone anymore. I know people get very creative once they learn the system and they learn how to make it work for what they need and what they feel they want to do to accommodate their patient. And I love that. Like I said, that's why it's just another tool. It's a learning curve for sure. But once you do it, you can make it sing and do exactly what you want it to do, which is an ideal situation for a practitioner. Occasionally you'll get a practitioner if I'm doing an education event, like, well, why don't you just go put those in Walgreens then? And it's like, okay, you're obviously missing the point. And there are people like that in our industry. Those are typically the people that are just trying to chase money. They're feeling slighted. They don't have the patient's interest at heart. They have their own interest at heart. And those people just get gobbled up and, I don't know. I'm trying to be nice, but it's people like that are very frustrating to me, but the vast majority are in it for the right reasons. Profitability is not a bad word. You have to make profit to be able to help other people that aren't in a position to get a new leg. There is a lot of philanthropic nature to our industry overall, but you have to be solid in your cash flow and your money to be able to pay your practitioners, your support staff, and to be able to do these things. Otherwise, then no one's benefiting at all. So I would say it's the adage of like, what do you hear on a plane? put your oxygen mask on first before you help the next person, or you're both going to freaking, flounder around and struggle. I can help more people if I have my oxygen mask on first. I can reach out and start helping other people get their mask on, you know, a lot more than if I'm struggling for air and trying to help everyone else, then, most people suffer in that way. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I think that way a lot.
So yeah, I think there's a couple things to unpack there that I really liked. One is, um, you cast the people while they're standing. That's part of the Symphony Aqua system, which I love. And so one of the things that drives me nuts, and I think it's still taught in school and such, is this idea of you cast with the patient in a little bit of flexion. Well, I I just never. I mean, I did that in school, but I never got that. Like your prosthesis is supposed to be most comfortable when you have your whole weight on it, which is when you're in single limb support, fully extended. And I will die on that sword that is the right way to capture a
I'm with
patient's.
you. I will die with you on that sword.
So anyway, I think that's um, very, very important. And I think the other thing to touch on, which you touched on, is there's a, a lot of different ways to make a prosthesis and a patient outcome is good. So I think that is, can the system benefit everyone? Yes, because there's a recipe, it's repeatable, all that. Is it necessary for a good outcome? No, there's people that have different ways of doing things, but the key to that is it doesn't scale. Like this actually can scale practice to practice. You can have people coming in, you get consistency, you've got clinicians that can cover for other clinicians and they know exactly what's happened. So I think that is really, I think for the listeners to take away is yes, you can have a good success doing everything by hand, casting with plaster, your 5 degree, knee flexion, 3-part cast, whatever it is. But you being able to train somebody else to do it the exact same way that you do it and have the same outcome is going to be vastly more difficult than doing something like what we're talking about,
And
where you
take a
have the
lot of
patient
time.
in there actually standing for you and take a lot of time. Like you're already there. And I love the aspect that you talk about. You're in the ballpark, right? You're very close. Minor adjustments to get patients happy and pleased with that, and minimal, like this idea of like, oh, we're too big. You always take a 9-ply reduction or whatever it is. That stuff drives me crazy too. But I think that's the key is that this kind of stuff, it is clinically relevant, um, and also repeatable and scalable. And I think that's what's exciting about it.
Love that. That's a great perspective. Like it's scalable. And the way I kind of internally view a practitioner, whether I think they're a good quality practitioner, and I'm not judging, but I look at it purely from, would I be comfortable going to them or sending a family member of mine to that practitioner? I don't care if they have a system. I'd prefer they run a system just because I know what the system can do. But to your point, I know there's plenty of practitioners that I hold in pretty high regard. I would very comfortably send my family or myself to get legs made or whatever, arms made from them, because their skill set and their knowledge, because their commitment to learning their craft and being the best they could possibly be, because they're patient centric. That's it. That's my measurement. That's how I view, the quality. And like you said, there's plenty of them that can make a very, very good prosthesis without having the system. But to your point, how do you take that knowledge and get the younger generations to learn that and absorb it and be able to consistently do what you do? That's the biggest challenge. And especially in this day and age in our industry, things are changing very, very rapidly. So I think it just lends itself into another validation of where the system really shines. One of the challenges, from a negative aspect on the system, because we don't make any claims like it's for everybody. I wish everyone would run systems. I think it would help our industry, but we're realistic. But one of the biggest aspects, we've already said it, it's just that level of consistency. It just bridges so much stuff. It's so important. You have to have an exit strategy at some point in your organization, right? Unless you're just going to one day, sorry, everyone, next month, it's time. We're closing the doors. We're shutting shop. Hey, I'm done. And that does happen. But typically, you sell it off to some of your infrastructure practitioners, people that have been with you a long time, or you sell to the bigger, the bigger organizations. So, but we've had plenty of people in the last several years buy systems simply because that they were viewing that as their transition strategy, because now they know that those younger practitioners, they might not have that level of experience that I have as the owner, the founder of this particular patient care. But now I know that, at least we're going to be putting out very high outcome, a very high outcome fitting socket, basically.
Well, and I would say the clinicians that are coming into the field, students and residents, they want to have very clear expectations, and they like systems. I look back at my residency, and it was a tough residency. It was grueling. And you get thrown into the deep end, and then it's at the end, it's like, okay, let's go back and make sure that you hit everything. And that's not the way this generation of clinicians are. They want to see the goals. They want to have some of the outputs. They want feedback. And I think it's great. And I really am excited about this new generation of clinicians. I think that there's a lot of good things. I'm not going to get too far deep into it, but they're also not going to put up with some of our stuff that's been historically, like you talk about the academy and the AOPA meetings, and how does ABC and BOC and all that, like, they don't have a massive tolerance for waste or kicking the can down the road, because this is their field now. And so
I love that. I love that aspect. And they're very sharp, very, very sharp. These younger generations coming into the field, which is good.
Yeah. So all that to say is, it's not only on the clinical side, but on this whole like political, our alphabet soup stuff. That's going to
don't get me on it. Don't get me started. People are gonna be like, oh, he seems like a nice guy. To like that guy's crazy.
Yeah, we won't go too far down. But anyway, that's what I love, is that they're going to be involved. So anyway, Matt, this has been awesome. I think our listeners are really going to benefit from knowing a little bit more about your company. Can you share your website, where you're at, and then we'll close it up?
Yeah, absolutely, Brent. Yeah, so you can find all of our information on everything we do that we talked about. There's other things about Cypress Adaptive that we didn't talk about, and that's okay. But if you go to just cypressadaptive.com, and then we're on pretty much every social media platform as well. We try to put a fair amount of content out, not to the level that Brent does, but we're trying. You can also reach out. Feel free to reach out to me. You can contact me through our website, or through email and whatnot as well. We're very accessible. My partners and I, we're very much involved in the field on a day-to-day basis. We love interacting and working with guys like Brent and other practitioners that are really trying to move the needle in a positive way. We love collaboration and working with people. So, you give us a shot. Look us up. Like I said, we're harmless. We're very accessible. We want to work with you. We want to make you successful and help you. That's it.
That's great. Well, thanks for coming on the show today. This was great.
Thanks, Brent.
And thank you for listening to this episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. And until the next episode, have a great day.